I wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 days. The Friday air still carried the hum of late summer when I turned my key in the front door of my childhood house. A breeze rustled through the maple trees along the driveway, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass, comforting, familiar. But the moment I stepped inside, comfort cracked like thin ice. Boxes. Stacked in the hallway, labeled in my mother's meticulous handwriting. Books, Charlotte. Kitchen, Charlotte. Bedroom, Charlotte. My breath caught. The silk of my blouse clung to my skin. I'd just come from a client pitch in Boston, still buzzing from the high of a deal sealed with a firm handshake. My phone vibrated in my bag, probably another congratulatory text, but its cheerful buzz felt jarringly out of place against the scrape of cardboard on hardwood. Through the doorway to the living room, I saw them. Mom and Dad, mid-motion, my father lifting a box while my mother taped another shut. Neither had noticed me yet. The sound of packing tape tearing through the quiet was sharper than any shout. I leaned against the cool wall, the edge of my nails brushing the chipped polish I'd been too busy to fix. Help me move into a tiny studio. Their words from last week, light as a joke, now landing like stones. The truth prickled behind my ribs. I had worked too hard, hidden too much for this, to come home early and find my life packed away like an afterthought. A lump formed in my throat, but pride steadied my voice. Planning a surprise I should know about? I said. Mom's head whipped around, guilt flashing across her face before she could hide it. I was 20 when the walls of our family home started to feel like a trap. Back then, I still believed love could survive on Sunday dinners and shared inside jokes. But that evening, 5 years ago now, love felt like a door slamming shut. It began with my father's voice, low but sharp. Lena, you need to be realistic. That art scholarship isn't a career. It's a hobby with tuition fees. My mother stood near the counter, fingers tight around a dish towel. She didn't speak, but her silence stung worse than any words. I'm not asking for a handout, I said, my voice trembling. I earned that scholarship. It's the first thing that's ever felt like mine. Dad exhaled through his nose, the way he did when the lawnmower wouldn't start. And where will that get you? Painting in some drafty attic? You need stability. Business school makes sense. I felt my pulse drum in my ears. The kitchen smelled of burnt coffee and lemon soap, but all I could taste was the bitter edge of disappointment. My mother finally looked up, eyes soft but distant. We just want you to have a safe life. Safe. The word was a cage. I grabbed the strap of my worn leather satchel, the one my grandmother, Ruth, had given me for my high school graduation. To carry your dreams, she'd said, pressing it into my hands like a quiet blessing. The satchel was scuffed now, the brass buckle scratched from years of being tossed onto library tables. My fingers brushed the buckle as if it could steady me. I can't be safe if it means being someone I'm not, I whispered. No one moved. No one called my name when I walked out. The night air wrapped around me, cool, damp, electric with the scent of rain on concrete. I remember the streetlight flickering overhead, a single moth batting itself senseless against the glass. I thought of Grandma Ruth's soft voice the week before, when she'd slipped a folded note into my palm. Trust the work you love. It will trust you back. I tightened my grip on the satchel. That was the night I chose myself. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because staying would have meant shrinking. And I refused to live small. I moved into that tiny walk-up on the edge of Brooklyn with nothing but a suitcase and the lingering echo of Mom's careful, cutting words. We're only helping you. The apartment was barely big enough for the twin mattress I bought secondhand and the wobbly IKEA desk I built with a butter knife because I couldn't afford a proper toolkit. But every square foot was mine. The first nights were the hardest. I'd fall asleep to the rattle of the subway below and wake to the sound of pipes groaning like old men in winter. The cold crawled through the cracked windows and into my bones. I kept telling myself this was the price of freedom. Every breath of frosty air a small declaration that I would not be defined by anyone's expectations. My grandmother's silver locket rested on the chipped nightstand, its hinge stubborn but still holding. Inside, a faded picture of her at my age, chin lifted in the same quiet defiance I felt blooming inside me. She used to whisper, "You build your own doors when no one gives you one to open." Those words became my private anthem. Daylight meant hustle. I worked mornings as a barista, inhaling the smell of dark roast and steamed milk while memorizing the regulars' orders. Extra hot latte for the lawyer on the corner, oat milk cappuccino for the novelist with ink-stained hands. Afternoons, I took free online coding classes, my fingers blistering from hours at the keyboard. By evening, I grabbed quick bites of dollar-slice pizza before clocking in for my night shift answering tech support calls. Sleep became a luxury, but progress tasted sweeter than rest. I learned to debug messy code, to build small, elegant websites for local businesses, first for the florist downstairs, then for the tiny thrift shop across the street. Word spread faster than I imagined. My first paid client handed me an envelope of cash and said, "Kid, you're a lifesaver." I tucked that envelope into my grandmother's locket for luck. A year later, I landed an apprenticeship at a boutique software firm owned by Marisol Vega, a woman who looked like she had wrestled the world into submission with her red lipstick and relentless smile. Marisol saw something in me I hadn't dared to see in myself. "You're not just good, Julia," she told me, her nails tapping the glass conference table. "You're exceptional. Don't let anyone shrink you." Under her mentorship, I learned the business side of tech, pitching to clients, negotiating contracts, and presenting ideas with a confidence that once felt like borrowed clothing. The paychecks grew. So did my savings. But I kept my success quiet. To my parents, I was still figuring things out, sending home only the vaguest updates. 2.5 years after that night I walked out, I signed a lease for a loft that overlooked the East River, a space filled with warm light and wide windows, a far cry from the studio they thought they'd push me into. I hung my grandmother's locket on a small hook beside the door, the silver catching the morning sun like a wink from the woman who'd always believed. I didn't invite my parents over. Not yet. Some truths deserve a stage, and I was still setting the scene. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 different ways, but nothing could have prepared me for the sight of my parents standing frozen in the foyer of my apartment. The same parents who once insisted a girl like me could never make it alone now stood gaping at a skyline view they could never have imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a wash of amber sunset, and the city's hum carried up 27 stories like a quiet applause. Dad's eyes darted from the sleek Italian sofa to the hand-blown glass vases, each piece catching the last light of day. Mom reached for the marble island as if to steady herself, her handbag slipping slightly down her wrist. "Madison," she finally whispered, the name catching on her breath. "This place. It's mine," I said simply, letting the two words hang there. They blinked, almost in unison, like the air had been knocked out of them. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the low purr of the built-in espresso machine cooling from its evening cycle. "You bought this?" Dad asked. His voice was low, bewildered. "Yes. Every square foot. No roommates, no rent split. Just me." I let my gaze travel across the room, from the polished walnut bookshelf stacked with industry awards to the framed photographs of my team celebrating our latest launch. Mom's hand tightened on the edge of the counter. "But you said you never told us." That I was struggling? That I'd barely scraped by? My words came out calm, but my pulse thudded in my ears. "You never asked. And when you did, you preferred answers that confirmed what you already believed." Their faces flickered with something like guilt. I saw Dad's shoulders slump just slightly, the way they used to when I brought home report cards that weren't perfect enough. "I remember the day I left," I continued, my voice steadying as the memory sharpened. "You packed my things while I was still at work. You said it was to help me move on, like I was some phase you needed to tidy up. And when I begged you to wait, to talk it through, you called me dramatic." Mom flinched at the word. "I moved into that tiny studio you picked without asking me. I slept on a mattress that touched 3 walls at once. And every night, I promised myself I'd build something so solid no one could ever box me in again." I walked them toward the office that overlooked the river. A single mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface neat except for the brass nameplate. Madison Pierce, founder and CEO. Dad stared at it, the letters catching the last threads of sunlight. "You built a company?" he said finally. "A company, a team, a life," I answered. "We design sustainable interiors now, hotels, offices, even city halls. You might have read about the new Riverside project in the Times last month." Mom covered her mouth. I caught the sheen of tears in her eyes. "You did all this without us," she said. "I had to," I replied, softer now. "You made it clear I wasn't welcome as I was. So I became someone even I barely recognized. Someone I'm proud of." The silence stretched. Out beyond the window, the river shimmered like a molten ribbon. For a moment, the city's lights began to blink on, tiny constellations against the dusk. Dad finally cleared his throat, his voice a mix of awe and regret. "Madison, we didn't know." "No," I said, holding his gaze. "You didn't want to know." And there it was, the shift I had dreamed of. The weight of their judgment slid from my shoulders and settled somewhere between us, no longer mine to carry. I let the silence stretch until it became a living thing between us. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioner and the faint tick of the wall clock, every second a reminder that the balance of power had shifted. Mom's eyes darted around my loft, her gaze catching on the framed design awards, the subtle gleam of the leather armchairs, the view of Manhattan glittering like a promise beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dad stood stiffly, his arms crossed as if bracing against a wind he hadn't expected. I folded my arms, my silk blouse whispering against my skin. "So," I said finally, my voice calm measured. "You came to help me pack, to move into a tiny studio." Mom's face flushed. We just thought you might need." "You thought I'd failed." The words came out without bitterness, only truth. "You never asked. You just assumed." Dad's jaw tightened. "We were trying to be practical." I took a slow breath, letting the city lights reflect in the glass behind me. Practical is fine, but respect is better. I moved closer, feeling the confidence that years of hard work had etched into me. "Here's what I'm willing to offer, because despite everything, I want us to be a family. But it has to change." Mom's lips parted, but I raised a hand gently. "First," I said, meeting Dad's guarded eyes, "no more decisions about my life without me. I'm not the timid 19-year-old who left home with a single suitcase. I built this on my own, and I expect to be treated as an equal." Dad shifted, a flicker of something, pride, crossing his face. "Second," I continued, turning to Mom, "you have to stop hiding behind what other people might think. You've spent so long protecting the family image that you forgot your own daughter needed belief, not approval." Her chin trembled. "I didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize," I said softly, not unkindly. "But you can start now." I reached into my desk drawer and set a small envelope on the table. "I bought the house. The one you thought we'd lose when I left. It's in both your names now." But I held their eyes, steady and unflinching. "There's a condition." Dad's brows lifted. "You use it," I said, "not as a monument to the past, but as a place to grow. Take that art class you always wanted, Mom. Start the community garden you dreamed of, Dad. Show me you can create something for yourselves, not just for appearances." Mom pressed a hand to her mouth. "I don't want apologies," I added, my voice softer now. "I want change. Real change. For you. For us." The clock ticked again, steady as my heartbeat. Finally, Dad exhaled. "We can do that," he said, his voice low but certain. Mom nodded, tears shining. "We will." A quiet relief washed through me, not the giddy triumph I once imagined, but something steadier, richer. I'd drawn the line, and they had heard me. The following Sunday morning felt different, like the house itself was breathing easier. When I pulled into the driveway, the early autumn air wrapped around me, cool and soft, the kind that smells faintly of pine, and something sweet you can't quite name. Through the front window, I caught sight of my parents at the kitchen table. Dad was hunched over a notebook, the old yellow legal pad he usually reserved for taxes. He looked up first, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. Mom followed, her eyes still a little puffy but bright in a way I hadn't seen in years. Inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the room. Mom stood and pressed a mug into my hands before I could even set my purse down. Hazelnut creamer, my favorite, she'd remembered. "We've been talking," Dad said, tapping his pen against the pad. "About downsizing, but not about you. About us. We need to stop making your life our project." Mom squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Ava. We tried to control what we didn't understand. We wanted you close because we were afraid." Her voice cracked but didn't break. I felt something inside me, some old, knotted thread, loosen. We lingered over coffee, talking about ordinary things. The new bookstore downtown, the neighbors' overgrown roses, even Dad's plan to volunteer at the community center. Their words weren't just small talk. They were quiet proof that they were beginning to trust the woman I'd become. As I rose to leave, Mom reached for my wrist. "One more thing," she said, her eyes glistening. "Your grandmother would be proud. She always said you'd find your own way." From my bag, I pulled out the old silver compass Grandma had given me the night I left home, a tiny relic I'd kept hidden through every late-night study session, every lonely apartment move, every hard-won victory. I placed it gently in Mom's palm. "She was my guide when I couldn't see the path," I said. "Now I think it belongs back here. A reminder for all of us." Mom held it to her heart, nodding through her tears. As I stepped back into the crisp morning, I caught my reflection in the car window, hair pulled into a messy knot, a faint smear of yesterday's plum lipstick still clinging to the corner of my smile. For the first time in years, the woman looking back wasn't a runaway or a fighter. She was simply and entirely me.